Friday, March 7th edition here on the Just Baseball Show. That's Arm Lane and I'm Peter Apple. And Arm, this one has the potential to be our longest episode ever. But it's not going to feel long because we have an absolute banger list of topics to go over. We're going to start with an evaluation of Roki Sasaki's spring training debut for the Dodgers, talk about the latest news surrounding Marlins ace Sandy Alcantara, and we continue our preview series with the American League East, and then we'll round it out with an interview with our friend Walker Buehler. And it is all brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. The first bet offer is back. All you got to do is use code JUSTBASEBALL. Many of our listeners who are new to BetMGM use the code and then bet on some of their favorite MLB futures, because if your first bet loses, you'll get your wager back up to $1,500 in bonus bets. But remember, gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older. Terms and conditions apply. So, Aram, as much as I love you, I think we got to skip past the pleasantries because we just have so much to talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Roki
There's a lot.
Sasaki. There's a lot. Roki Sasaki, 3 innings, 2 hits, 0 earned runs, only 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. The fastball was sitting 97 to 99 miles an hour. The splitter looked like a complete unicorn pitch. He was also dropping that curveball in there. Very, very exciting if you're a Dodger fan.
So I don't. Here's the craziest part. You talk about it being a unicorn pitch. TrackMan doesn't know what to do with it. I think it was all splitters because I was going back and looking at it, and you had the broadcast having no idea what to call what pitch, and then people on Twitter and X like we're trying to figure out what's what. You have people posting like the plots and the stuff plus, and you're seeing like a grade for a slider or a curveball, but I think it's also a splitter that he manipulates, which is just outrageous. So he has the splitter that gets 500 RPM, which basically is absurd to kill that much spin. It just makes it fall off the table. And then I think he puts a little bit more pressure on his finger and throws another one at like 1800 RPM, which is closer to the average spin rate of a splitter. And that pitch moves a little bit differently. So I think it was all splitters, but they're two splitters that are so different that TrackMan doesn't know what to do with it. That just shows you how unique that pitch is.
So I have a bunch of questions for you on this front because you have been at the forefront of the Roki Sasaki analysis. You've posted multiple things to our YouTube, tons of articles on justbaseball.com. You've turned those into clips on TikToks. You've been following this guy for a while now. So my first question for you, what were you looking for in his first outing? Like, what was the one thing that you wanted to see from him?
Well, first and foremost, fastball velocity and just quality. That was the thing I was most interested to see because you always are going to lose a little bit of that vert, like we've talked about, when you go from the NPB or KBO ball to the MLB ball. Naturally, it's just not going to carry the same way. And we knew that was going to happen with him. But then also you've seen the velocity fluctuations with him over the last year, with just the shoulder stuff that he was dealing with. So to see him right back at 98 was awesome, and touching 99 was awesome. But also seeing like the characteristics, he got 7 feet of extension, which there was some wide ranges of the extension that he was getting at points. That's plus. Average extension is about 6.5 feet. He got 6.9. So he's well above average there. The velocity being there. And then just the command in general. I just wanted to see what the feel for that splitter would look like. Again, throwing it with the MLB ball here. And a big value of his splitter is his ability to manipulate it and make it look like two different pitches. But I didn't know if there would be that same feel to manipulate on the field here right away. When I watched him on the backfields, the kind of higher spin version, he really struggled to land. Totally different story this time around. He was landing that thing, pretty consistently. So it was cool to see. I think the adrenaline really worked wonders for him. And he doesn't even need to be around the zone, to be successful, which is the craziest part. I think only 56% of his pitches were actually strikes, but you're going to get chase. You're going to get so many swings and misses that it just shows you he doesn't even have to dominate the strike zone to be successful.
One thing that I want to stick on is the four-seam fastball, because you said that you were looking to maintain fastball velocity. And fastball velocity is great, but we know that every hitter in Major League Baseball, no matter how hard you throw it, maybe if there isn't that level of induced vertical break, that ride, that that pitcher can get on the fastball with the amount of spin. So 99 can look great on the radar gun, but maybe 99 with a pitcher with incredible amounts of induced vertical break or tons of spin on the fastball looks a little bit different from a different type of 99. And the reason I bring this up is we've compared this with Paul Skeens, and it didn't seem to matter, right? His
Yeah.
fastball metrics coming out of LSU weren't ideal. And then on the field, we see Jackson Holiday saying that it felt like it was 110 miles an hour. So when you look into the metrics on this fastball and you don't see a ton of spin, you see mostly 13 to 15 inches of induced vertical
Yeah.
break, which I think is a little bit below league average. Does that
Yeah.
scare you at all, or is it more just this guy's kind of a unicorn? All of his pitches are just different than what we're used to?
I don't think it's scary, but I do think it's scary if the velocity drops, right? Because
Mm.
this is a very velocity dependent fastball. Like 100's 100. Obviously, if you have 100 with better characteristics, you get the Mason Miller type of fastball where it's just going to be overwhelming. But like it does matter a lot for him velocity wise. Like if he's 99 versus 98 on average for the course of the season, that is going to make a big difference because the shape is pretty standard, or honestly a little bit less carry than you would expect from a pitcher from his release height bucket, which is about 6.1 to 6.2 feet. MLB average is about 5.9 feet there. So it definitely matters, like the velocity, I think, more than anything. So if he's sitting 98, 99, we'll be fine. But if that velocity slides to 97, I think that's where you could start to see that fastball get hit pretty hard. And I still think in general, there's going to be pressure on him to just execute. Because if he does miss over the middle a lot with the fastball, like guys are going to hit that even at 98. It's because it doesn't have as much life as some of the other fastballs that these guys are seeing. So it's something to monitor, but I also just think it just puts more importance on his ability to sustain that upper 90s to 100-mile-per-hour velocity. Skeens has some built-in deception, and Skeens also has a more vast pitch mix, right? So I think that's what works in his favor. With Sasaki, like he needs that fastball because we see it's going to be mostly fastball splitter. He's probably going to start to mix in a little bit more of the breaking balls. I don't think that was too much of a focus yet, but he's going to be more reliant on his fastball, I think, than maybe a Skeens when Skeens can mix in all these different offerings and has the built-in deception. Velocity is going to be a huge part of this whole thing for Sasaki. So health is ultimately the most important aspect as well.
And speaking about that splitter, when we say unicorn type pitch, the low amount of spin on it, it's only like 700 to 800 RPMs. And when I was watching it, he's releasing it from the exact same release height as the fastball. So they look the same coming out of the hand, but one is staying up and one is completely falling off the table. And it also looked like sometimes it would fall off the table into lefties and then sometimes away from lefties or into righties. It was almost kind of impossible to know which direction it was going. But regardless, whenever he threw it, these hitters just looked like they had no
Yeah.
idea what to do with it. Because there's one thing with a nasty pitch right and you get some swing and miss, and then it's another thing to make major league hitters look like little leaguers. That's what it looked like when he was pounding this splitter. So talk to the uniqueness about this pitch because calling it a unicorn pitch, I don't think is outlandish
No,
already.
it 100% is. When I put it on a scatter plot with every MLB pitcher, it was just in its own realm. Like there's no splitter that is anywhere near his spot on the scatter plot when you're looking at horizontal and vertical movement, and then of course spin rate and things like that. And then the ability to manipulate it is just a different level of unique where you're going to get almost a cutterish version of it where he's able to get it kind of breaking towards his glove side, and then other times where it is either just diving straight down or even kind of fading to his arm side a little bit. As a hitter, there's really no way to game plan for that. You just have to try to sit fastball and not miss the fastball when you get it and hope that you can spin on the splitter in time. But it's impossible because, as you mentioned, the release point's almost identical, and he's worked hard to mimic that. And I just don't know what you can do as a hitter because it's so hard to pick it up until it's too late. But the pitch shape is, I think, most similar to certain pitchers like gyro cutters that they've thrown. Like it's in its own realm when it comes to changeups and splitters that you're just not going to see anything like it. So hitters just have not really been able to prepare for anything like this because they've never really seen it before. So when you're trying to get ready for a guy like this, I think it's just don't miss the fastball, which is part of the reason why I think it's even more important for Sasaki to have that fastball command and quality. But also, it helps his fastball when in the back of their mind, they've got to worry about this freakish splitter that can do a few different things. And it's almost like two different pitches built into one.
I'm fascinated to see what his 2025 campaign looks like because, coming over, he doesn't have a ton of innings racked up in the MPB, right? This is not a guy who's consistently even throwing over 130 innings, right? He's still a young guy. When he was posted, every team had the opportunity to sign him because he wasn't in the Yamamoto bucket where you needed at least 300 million just to talk to him. Anybody could, but he gets to choose the Dodgers and on a team that can go 7 or 8 deep, especially when Shohei Ohtani returns, when Clayton Kershaw returns. Tony Gonsolin is still going to fight for a spot in this rotation. And then, of course, all of the guys that they have now. The Dodgers, they're predicted to win 110 games, 115 games because of how just the immense amount of talent that is on the Dodgers. But the Dodgers know themselves. They just have to get to October. So I assume they're kind of baby these guys along the way. So while we want to see Roki Sasaki throw 150 to 200 innings, we want to see him every fifth day. We're probably not going to. So he's probably going to throw 115 to 120 innings. But in those innings, it's going to be very exciting. One thing that I wanted to note on from just talking about his pitch mix is I do feel like there will be days throughout the season where he's not landing the splitter. And when he's not, I saw a lot of hitters, even just in this 3 inning stretch, sit dead red heater and they put some really good swings on it.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be some inconsistencies, but scattered throughout those 115 to 130 innings that he throws this year, we're going to see some complete box office type starts.
Oh, yeah.
Some starts where these hitters have no idea what's happening because it's 99 at the top. It's the splitter wherever he wants it while mixing in breaking balls. So during some of the strikeouts, it looked unbelievable. And then some of the at bats where these guys were sitting dead red heater, you could see some of the mistakes.
100%. And I think that's where at least the benefit is, if he's not locating the splitter for a strike, if it's anywhere near the zone, he'll be able to get away with it for the most part because it's going to look like a fastball until it's not. But, I think we saw it in the Ellie De La Cruz at bat, right, where he falls behind 2-0 and then Ellie shoots a double the other way on a fastball. Like if he is falling behind in the count, like yeah, that fastball is not going to be as big of a swing and miss pitch as he needs it to be probably to get him back into count. So that's where there's maybe some importance on, being able to spin a breaking ball in there, here or there, or whatever it may be. And also just locate that fastball because there's times where when he's, spotting it, it has a little bit of run to it. Like he can locate it in on righties or, kind of run it away from lefties. But yeah, when he's not locating the splitter though, like those could be the kind of welcome to the big league starts because that hitters like the game plan is going to be, try to make him locate that splitter. It's going to be hard to separate it out of the hand, but if you can get ahead in the count, all of a sudden Sasaki becomes, a little bit more human.
It did seem though on some 1-2, 0-2, 2-2 counts when he went to the splitter, it was just automatic good night.
Yeah. I mean, and then you're going to overthink it, and then he's going to throw a fastball, and you're going to take it for strike three at the knees. Like that. That's where if he's establishing the splitter, you're in trouble. Like he's on no hitter watch. But to your point, there's going to be, I think, a fair amount of volatility because when he's not locating that, and hitters can sit on the fastball and guess right, they got a shot.
They got a shot. But then when you are down 1-2, it's going to be hard to have a shot.
Yeah,
All right,
I don't know what you do.
let's move over to the next headline. Sandy Alcantara. The Marlins will have Sandy Alcantara on an innings limit, leading contenders to believe he will be available come October if they can acquire him, per ESPN's Jeff Passan. As a Marlins fan, what does this news even mean? Like, is it the White Sox giving Garrett Crochet 4 innings a start? Would they give him an innings limit kind of anyway because he's coming off Tommy John surgery and this is almost a nothing report? Kind of, we assume that because the Marlins are in a rebuild, they are likely to trade guys who can get them a lot of prospects. So we kind of already knew this, or is this new news How did you read through it?
Well, it was interesting because, I think there was some conversation that he may not have any limitations, and that's because he's a freak show. And I think if you ask Sandy Alcantara, he's going to say, I don't want any limitations. I know for a fact they've had to tell him to like chill out a little bit in spring training because he only has one speed. And he's throwing 100 before they were even getting into a game setting, and it's just the only way he knows how to throw, right? So we're already seeing he's kind of in midseason form already, and that's just a guy that he's going to throw as much as he possibly can throw. And so I think if the idea was, hey, he's not going anywhere for sure, he's 100% staying a Marlin, they'd probably let him decide his own fate. And, if he wants to throw 220 innings first year off of TJ, like maybe he would have the authority to do so. But, I do think that there's a level of if this team's on pace to lose 100 games again, and, Sandy's going to be 30 years old and he probably wants to pitch for a contender at some point. The Marlins are still in rebuild mode, and Sandy's contract is one of the more favorable in Major League Baseball. You can imagine that the haul that they could get for him if he's throwing like he was in 2023. You don't want to put Sandy in a, or you don't want to really put Sandy in a situation where come deadline time he's already on at 100 and whatever innings, and a team that acquires him is also going to have him for a couple years, is going to give up their farm for him, and they want him available, one, for the playoffs, but then two, they want him available for the next couple years as well because they just gave up a haul for him. So you want to kind of position him to be available, because if you trade for a player, you want him for the playoff run you're making this year, but then you also want him available for the next couple years. So I think it's just keeping all of their options open. And I mean, we all know that that was going to be the case, right? I mean, we saw the press conference where it was like they didn't say we're trading Sandy, but they didn't say we're not trading Sandy. And I think that was enough. Where I don't think it's inevitable, but it's definitely going to be a situation where they're listening. And if you're listening, you want to put yourself in a position where you can get the best offers possible. And that's probably not with him throwing complete games, every fifth day through the first half of the season.
Who are the teams that come to mind first when it comes to trading for Sandy Alcantara
I
from the
was thinking
Marlins?
about this yesterday, dude, and like it's the Dodgers could absolutely put together an offer that, because we're updating the top 100, by the way, it's going to be out on Monday, and there's two Dodgers prospects in the top 15 who are, one is completely blocked in Dalton Rushing, so there's a spoiler alert there, and then another one who I've been gushing about on the show forever, um, and then they've got several other guys. But you literally have a prospect that couldn't be more blocked, that in Dalton Rushing, that I mean any team would be thrilled to have. He's a guy that can catch. He's a great offensive piece. He mashes. Like, that's the craziest part. But I feel like you have to, if you're the Marlins, like you got to boycott that, right? Like, but you're worried about yourselves. And if you can get Zaire Hope and Dalton Rushing, like, how do you not do that? That could end up being an all-time haul for Peter Bendick. So that's the one that makes me nervous. Is the Dodgers could probably top anybody's offer. I don't think they need to, but they could.
Do you think the Marlins would rather trade Sandy to the Dodgers or trade in division to the Mets? Because the Mets need a starting pitcher like Sandy as well. And they're going to be on the open market come deadline season, likely looking for a starter. And you got one in your division that
Yeah.
could slot in as an immediate ace. So where do you think they'd rather go? Or just say, screw both of you, we're going into the American League no matter what.
Yeah, we'll send him to the. I think that's one where the Marlins would probably not want to go in division because you're dealing with that for 3 years, and the Mets will probably extend him off of that immediately, and Sandy's just going to haunt you forever. Like you, optically, after trading Luzardo in division as well, like I think that would be tough. I think it would be Dodgers, but there's some other teams that could absolutely pull this thing off. I'm so tired of talking about it, but the time might be the most perfect for the Orioles at this point, where Kobe Mayo has struggled a little bit. He was probably untouchable before. Now probably they're okay moving him. The Marlins, absolutely could use a bat like that. There's no path to Mayo getting consistent playing time anytime soon. I don't really know how it's going to work. They could revisit that, and him being a headliner along with some other pieces He's a South Florida kid. It's kind of a no-brainer there. And I mean, the Orioles, they clearly don't want to make a major splash. Michael Elias is always timid. If I'm a scared exec and I don't want to make that like big move, this is the big move that is as safe as possible. Because even if Sandy is pitching to his like 2024 version before he got TJ, like no one's going to be like, that's the worst trade ever. Like, what were you doing? Like, I can't see a way where trading for Sandy Alcantara and his contract is going to blow up in your face unless Kobe Mayo becomes Austin Riley. And then even if that happened, I still don't think anybody would be saying like, what the fuck, Michael Elias. So I think that is one where like maybe he finally just like does it, but they have the capital, even with the diminished farm system, to be able to do it.
And that's why sometimes we get frustrated with the Baltimore Orioles and Mike Elias because, to your point, they could trade Kobe Mayo. They have Jordan Westburg at third, and then at first base, you still have Ryan O'Hearn and Ryan Mountcastle. And then you could add another player who they don't have room for. They signed Tyler O'Neill when we thought it was going to be Heston Kjerstad's job. Doesn't seem like it's his job anymore. So
Nope.
why not package Kobe Mayo and Heston Kjerstad in a deal with others in order to get Sandy Alcantara? It's so obvious, and you wouldn't even feel it that much, and it
No.
would make you so much better. But will they do it?
Changes everything.
But what I will say is there is that communication between GMs there with Mike Elias and Peter Bendix. They already made that trade for Trevor Rogers, so at least they both have each other's phone number.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. At least Michael Elias will pick up. But
Yes.
he may not after that trade now. Rogers for Norby is already not looking great, and Stowers thrown in there. But like the Tigers have the capital to do so. Scott Harris hasn't made like his big splash, but like that wouldn't floor me because if they're, making a push, that could be one that kind of puts them over the top. And then, I try to look around the league and who else, but I think a lot of different teams could justify that move because again, this is one that it's hard to call it risky, especially if he looks like he's 100% healthy and ready to go, which seems like he is more than ready to go.
What about an Alcantara swap with Chicago? Kevin Alcantara and then some for Sandy. What do you think about that one? Because they
I
could
mean,
use him in that rotation as well.
and they've had plenty of dialogue, right? I think something fell through with the Luzardo conversation. I think with some medicals on the Cubs side, which pure speculation, but came out not that long after that. Owen Casey had to undergo sports hernia surgery, I believe. So maybe that was part of it. But they have a lot of prospects as well that are kind of blocked. Also, Kevin Alcantara, as you mentioned, if PCA is healthy, he's blocked. James Triantos doesn't really have any spot to play anytime soon either. They've got several other guys that are really solid prospects that I think that could put together a very competitive package. And like we've talked about it, unless the Cubs make another move, the Kyle Tucker trade is still kind of a head scratcher. So they've shown a willingness to trade prospects, and I think that would be a perfect spot for them to do it. So that's another one that I think could make a ton of sense for sure.
So just to wrap this up, you think there's a 99% chance that Sandy is on another team at the end of July?
99 is probably high. Um, I think it's my guess is it's probably likely. It's just
The reason I say 99% is they will trade Sandy if he's performing well and not injured. And I give Sandy, among all pitchers, like one of the highest likelihoods to do that. That's where
I
I'm at
mean,
with that. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
that's the thing. He's going to be shoving,
Yeah.
and your teams are going to be lining up and giving you offers that, for a rebuilding team, it might be hard to turn that down. If the Marlins are shockingly, competitive and making some waves, and I could, maybe see them trying to ride it out because I think at that point, Sandy, by all indications, loves being in Miami, and I think by all indications, the franchise absolutely loves him for good reason. He's a great person as well. So if they're competing, I think you could make that case. It seems a little far fetched, obviously, but I think this guy's coming off a TJ. He's going to be 30 years old. Like I know they made the playoffs, but of course that's the year he wasn't even able to really contribute too much. Like this is, I think, the time for him to be able to go pitching more meaningful games. And, if another year with the Marlins, he'll be on the other side of 30 and we don't even know where they'll be at next year either. I see the vision. I like where they're headed. I do think they're building something here, but are they building something for a 30-year-old to be able to reap the rewards of, I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen in time.
Well, we will see. Everybody in YouTube comments, let us know. Comment down below where you think that Sandy ends up come trade deadline season. Maybe you think he stays with the Marlins, or which team do you predict? And give us a package as well. Go deep into your bag, people. Let us know in the YouTube comments below. And while you're down there, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and of course, we'll see your comments down there. Before we get to the American League East preview, where we're going over the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Orioles, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Toronto Blue Jays, and then, of course, an interview with Walker Buehler, our first break. So before we get to our American League East preview, Arm and I want to soft launch something that we've been working on all off season, and it's developing a Discord. So I think Arm and I can agree. When we started Just Baseball, we wanted to create a community that talked about baseball across the board. Major League Baseball, minor leagues, fantasy, betting, trading cards, college baseball, all of it. And we've done that by producing so much content, whether it be on the website, throughout our podcast network, on social media, all that kind of stuff. And a few years ago, we started a chalkboard group chat because we wanted to be able to talk with the great supporters of us about baseball 24/7 because that's what we love to do. That's the community that we've been trying to create over here. But the problem was we got it up to 5,000 members and it was awesome, but it felt like there were more people coming in free just to scam. I felt that I was spending my entire time just removing scammers because it was easy to come in free. So what we've done this off season is create a Discord, a large baseball group chat where you'll have all of my picks in it. You'll have Arm breaking down the top 100 prospects and, of course, all the different lists. You're going to have our fantasy guys with their fantasy baseball preview. You're going to have college baseball talk with the on the clock guys. You're going to have
Draft.
box breaks. We're going to do draft. We're going to do everything inside there, and it's going to be $5 for the first month. We're releasing it March 10th and then April 1st throughout. It's going to be $10 a month. We wanted to make it a very affordable price, right? Right now it's about half the price of a Netflix subscription, but just so we can keep out the scammers and keep it to the people who want to talk about baseball 24/7. We're going to have all of our writers in there. It is going to be awesome, and it comes out March 10th along with Arm's Top 100 update.
Yeah, which I'm excited because we're going to be doing like mailbags that can just be for questions to be asked from subscribers. On top of that, bonus content in there like bonus episodes, bonus Q&As, box breaks that we're doing just for people that are in that Discord as well. All of our content's still going to be available, publicly. It's all going to be the same. This is just bonus content. Also another way to support Just Baseball and our writers and everybody that's working with us. But on top of that, a way for us to connect where every time I drop a top prospect list, I always want to do like a Q&A type of thing. But, and we've done those on YouTube, but I think this is a better way to be able to answer all the specific questions you may have when we drop something. For our writers who release pieces, be able to talk to them as they release it. When we have an episode, if you want to interact and talk about some of the things that we broke down in there, like we'll always be conversing in there. But I think also the bonus content, tons of giveaways, a lot of other things that, you can be involved with that really connect the Just Baseball crew to the audience we're really excited about. And we're going to continue to add a ton of value to that subscription, whether it be the giveaways, the bonus content, the interactiveness, and just keeping you up to date with everything we've got going on, and special promotions and stuff from our partners and things like that as well.
So we hope that you guys will join. Again, that will be releasing on March 10th on Monday. Arm and Jack will probably talk a little bit more about it on the Sunday episode, so be on the lookout for that. You can follow us on X. Arm and my handles are both in the episode description, where we'll be dropping more content as well surrounding that Discord. So be on the lookout to join again on March 10th. All right, Arm, without further ado, let's get into the American League East preview. And if you haven't seen, we've done the American League West, where Jack and Arm went through each team in that division, given their predicted order of finish. Then Jack and I did the American League Central, again, predicted order of finish. And we're going to do the same thing here with the American League East. First, we're going to go through the offense, the starting rotation, and the bullpen. We'll start with the New York Yankees, and let me give you a rundown of their team, and then we can break down this offense. So the catching tandem is going to be Austin Wells as the starter, coming off a near Rookie of the Year campaign with Alex Jackson as his backup. The outfield is likely going to look like Jason Dominguez in left field, Cody Bellinger in center field with Aaron Judge in right field. The infield is going to look like Paul Goldschmidt at first base, Jazz Chisholm at second base, Anthony Volpe at shortstop. And while Giancarlo Stanton nurses both tennis elbows, we're going to have Ben Rice in the DH spot with Oswaldo Cabrera at third base as DJ LeMahieu also nurses back an injury. He got a strained calf at the beginning, I think it was the beginning of March. And he's going to be sidelined for a couple of weeks. And then the bench, again, you have Alex Jackson at catcher. You have Oswald Peraza, probably as a backup infielder, Pablo Reyes as well, with Trent Grisham as your fourth outfielder. So, the big question surrounding this offseason for the Yankees, did they do enough to replace Juan Soto? I think they didn't when it comes to the offense, but you can also argue that the Yankees bought into more of a run prevention type team rather than a run scoring, adding Max Fried, adding Devin Williams, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's hard not to be a little bit disappointed, even coming from me, a Yankee fan, looking at this lineup, relying on guys like Paul Goldschmidt and Cody Bellinger to take over for Juan Soto's production.
Yeah, and I think what they're probably looking at is, hey, we don't have to replace his production to get back to where we were if we do some other things a little bit better and some other guys take a step forward. But I think that's the big key here, right? Is you're counting on, another step forward from Austin Wells, a full season of Jazz Chisholm, who maybe takes a step forward. Anthony Volpe, absolutely, you're counting on taking a step forward. Jason Dominguez, you're counting on taking a step forward. If all those guys can do that, and not even all of them, but if you get half or three out of four of them kind of progressing in the way that you want to see, you can make up some of that gap. But I agree. I think they figured, let's just try to make this team better any way we can, and we'll fill in the gaps in other ways. I think they're better in the sense that they don't have it's clear cut of deficiencies where they may not need to be as active at the deadline, hopefully, if things go the way that you want them to go. But at the same time, we talked about it. I do think on the offensive side, there is a lack of star power outside of Aaron Judge, that if Aaron Judge goes down or in the stretches where Aaron Judge is slumping, if that happens, like, who's the guy that picks up the offense? Who's the guy that protects Aaron Judge as well? Like, I'm pitching around Judge. I'm not worried about Bellinger. I hope he could be fine. I think he's gonna have a nice year. I'm not that worried about Paul Goldschmidt. I think he could bounce back and have a nice year. Who are you worried about? I think Jazz Chisholm has the second highest upside offensively, maybe on this group.
So, for the Yankees offense to be good, here's the recipe. It's Jazz Chisholm taking what he did in those 40 to 50 games with the Yankees and extrapolating that over a 162 game schedule. Maybe not to that level, because when he came over and hit 11 home runs and stole 18 bases, put up a 132 WRC plus, you extrapolate that out, that's 35 homers and 60 steals. We're
He's
not asking
capable
for
of
that.
it.
But can he replicate 25 home runs and 40 steals like he did last year with maybe even more upside? Like Jazz Chisholm could be, I remember when we were talking about some of the projections from the Bat X. Well, Jazz Chisholm was one of 7 players projected with at least 25 home runs and 40 steals. So if he can be 30, 40, which is not out of the realm of possibility, that's immediately your second best hitter.
Mhm.
Continuing this recipe. Austin Wells. We saw him kind of go up and down offensively last year, but you can point to a lot of unluckiness, right? The batted ball quality was excellent. He was putting up consistently good ABs, but there was a lot of warning track flyouts. There was a lot of line drive outs. You expect him to kind of put it all together in 2025. So the Yankees' recipe for success is Bellinger and Goldschmidt being like the 5th and 6th hitters. And here's another guy who I expect to step up to help this Yankees offense. While Giancarlo Stanton is nursing these tennis elbows, I'm expecting Ben Rice to hit the ground running. And I know that Ben Rice, he's not a big time name yet because he was tearing through the minor leagues offensively for the Yankees. And they brought him up when Anthony Rizzo went down. And he was put up a 760 OPS in his first few months, looked like a really good option there. And then Anthony Rizzo comes back and he's going up and down again. But this guy has displayed good power production. He's displayed good plate discipline production in the minor leagues. He's a guy who can step up to make the Yankees offense just a little bit better. And then if he can hit so well that Aaron Boone cannot take his bat out of the lineup, then is it a Paul Goldschmidt, Ben Rice platoon at first base? What does that look like? That's the recipe for success. Is if your second best and third best hitters are Bellinger and Goldschmidt, the Yankees are probably going to have a win total in the 80s.
Yeah. 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 And that's 100% it. Right. And I think availability of Jazz is going to be huge. Yeah, because it's another guy that you have the injury concern just throughout his career. If he's banged up too, all of a sudden that infield, it becomes very thin, right? Where it's Volpe, you get Goldschmidt at first base, but then Oswaldo Cabrera at third base, and Oswald Peraza at second. Like all of a sudden, it's not the prettiest picture there. So that's the other side of it. Like I think you can pow at third base just being Oswaldo Cabrera, who has shown to be able to be serviceable, and if the rest of the lineup's doing their thing, that's fine. But I'm with you. These other guys are going to need to step up a fair deal, but there could just be a chance where everybody's providing 110, 115 WRC pluses, and Aaron Judge is your superstar, and that could be enough. And I think that's where you look at the pitching staff, and it really comes down to, can they pitch at the best of their ability? If they do, I think that's what really unlocks the ceiling of the Yankees. Because I agree with you. Once you lost Juan Soto, it's like, okay, what's our strength going to be? And I think the strength ultimately still is going to be pitching. And I think they kind of leaned into that even a little bit further, maybe.
One question that I'm fascinated to know the answer to as the Yankees start playing baseball now in a couple of weeks, it's coming up, is who hits leadoff for this team? Because in spring training, we're recording on Thursday, March 6th today, Austin Wells was leading off. And it kind of resembled Kyle Schwarber leading off for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? They're not quite the same because Schwarber has 48 home runs and a 15% walk rate. It's not quite the same amount of hitter, but they look similar in the box. So is Austin Wells the answer at the leadoff position? Hard for me to imagine that. I don't remember ever in my 27 years watching the Yankees that I've seen a catcher lead off for them. But then who is it? Is Anthony Volpe taking that next step? But do you really want to go righty righty to start off the game? So then that brings my mind to, is it Jazz Chisholm leading off? Could potentially Jason Dominguez work himself into the leadoff role? Lineup construction, I'm fascinated by. Is it Bellinger in the leadoff spot? I really don't know how they're going to construct this lineup, but the one thing that we do know is that Aaron Judge is going to hit second, and I don't know how they're going to build this lineup around him.
Have they said for sure Judge is going to hit second?
That's what Boone said.
Yeah.
So just kind of going off
I
his
kind of
word.
like the
Nothing's
idea
been.
of Judge hitting first, to be honest. But yeah, he I think is hit second most in his career, so I get it. That makes sense. Historically, Wells has done a really good job of getting on base, so I think maybe that would be a situation for him just to lean back into that. I mean, when he was in college specifically, he walked as much as just about anybody in the country, and I mean I watched that consistently on the Cape too. Like he's and through the minor leagues at points, very very patient. So I think that's something that could absolutely be a big part of his game and leaning into that. I mean, he still walked an 11% clip as a rookie. It's pretty impressive. So I think it could be Wells. It's just a guy that grinds out, sees a lot of pitches at the top of the order, and gets on base at a decent clip. But Jazz is kind of a frustrating leadoff hitter because he'll be aggressive early. He doesn't really fit the mold there, but at the same time, that mold has changed. And if he goes yard to lead the game off, I don't think anybody's complaining. So I do agree, though. I think Wells is probably the favorite and makes the most sense, and I think they're kind of tipping their hand there with that.
So I think this Yankees offense overall has some upside. They finished third in OPS in all of Major League Baseball's an offense last year. I think they'll probably sit between the 8 to 12 range, right? I think they could creep into the top five if my recipe comes true, right? If guys like Austin Wells take a big step, if Jazz Chisholm takes another step, if Volpe, Dominguez, Rice, if
If
all of
Dominguez is a
these.
rookie of the year candidate like he's supposed to be, I think he's the odds-on favorite right now. Like, Yeah,
Yeah, this
absolutely.
could be a top five offense, or they are one Aaron Judge injury away, and a couple of these guys not stepping up to kind of revert back into the 12 to even
Yeah,
15
very,
range.
very middling, 100%.
One thing that I wanted to mention that, and it's going to continue to ring in my ears, is that Yankees fifth inning where the defense fell apart. And this defense still doesn't look any good, right? You have Austin Wells, a catcher who is a really good defensive catcher. You have Aaron Judge in right field, who is a very good defensive right fielder. You have Anthony Volpe, who's a very good defensive shortstop. But then you have Jason Dominguez still making adjustments in left field. Oswaldo Cabrera is not known for his defensive acumen at third, right? Jazz Chisholm, I think, can be a good defender at second, maybe. I think Paul Goldschmidt can be a fine defender at first baseman still. And Cody Bellinger, he used to be a great defender, but over the last couple of seasons, the numbers haven't exactly confirmed what maybe our eyes remember about Cody Bellinger. So that's still one area of the team that I wish they cleaned up, and they didn't really do that.
Yeah, that'll be the interesting thing to monitor. I do think Bellinger is going to play a better center field now, and just be a little bit better of a defender in general. And getting Judge out of center will probably be helpful in general as well. But yeah, that's going to be the big thing to monitor too on the defensive side. And Jazz moving around so much, maybe having an assigned position there and consistently playing second base helps him as well because he has looked good there.
Let's move on to the starting rotation. Leading us off, Garrett Cole, who got destroyed today in spring training, but I am pretending to forget it because it was the Minnesota Twins, who I did just say raked on our last episode. So, you win some and you lose some. Max Fried is coming in as the SP2 after signing a big time deal this offseason. You got Carlos Rodon in the 3 spot, Clark Schmidt in the 4 spot, and Marcus Stroman rounding out the rotation with Will freaking Warren knocking on the door. I want to talk about Garrett Cole. I want to talk about Max Fried. I want to talk about all these guys. But the guy who I'm gushing over right now the most is Will Warren. I know he last year with his cup of coffee with the Yankees, it did not look good, but this guy is a top pitching prospect in the organization for a reason. I know I already glazed over him on Wednesday's episode, so I'll more throw it over to Aram to take kind of the glazing out of my language, but maybe speak to what I've been seeing with this improved changeup, with the improved sweeper, and the fact that he can go four seam or two seam in. Everything looked a lot more refined. And then when Pitching Ninja posts a side by side of him and Michael King, yeah, I'm gonna go crazy. Arm, sue me.
Yeah, no, I think there's some adjustments that he made that have him in a pretty good spot, and I ultimately think he could be a better option than Stroman. But Stroman's made it clear he's only starting, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Stroman's a fine five option there too. But I think looking at what you can potentially get from Warren with the pitch mix, the four seamer and the sinker, both it's shorter spurts, but both look like they're up a little bit velocity wise, and just have a little bit more life to it. And he's creating more deception now with the angles. I think he could if you're only expecting him to be your five, that's a really good five to have between him or Stroman. And I think the Yankees definitely focused on him. And with Chase Hampton unfortunately going down, and some of their other arms going down, and Luis Heel, now on the shelf for a while with the strained lat, it's become even more important for Warren to be an option for them, whether Stroman grabs that five spot or not. So I think the rotation is in a pretty good spot, even with heel hurt, because of what Warren has been able to do. And I think even just looking at the improvements here, you got to feel pretty good about him at least being a quality five for you.
Absolutely. And just overall, I am the most excited between all the units on the Yankees. I'm the most excited for this starting rotation because you could call it potentially top heavy at the top because of how good it is at the top, with Garrett Cole being a top five pitcher in Major League Baseball. I was just listening to an interview on Casa de Club, Corey Kluber's podcast, where he was talking about how the hunger is still there. And I think we forget that while he was injured to start last season, when he came back, there wasn't quite the same strikeout stuff. It took him a little bit to get his, feet under him. But then in September, he looked great. And then we can't forget in that wretched game 5 performance, Garrett Cole threw 6 2/3, 0 earned runs. I know 5 runs came across the plate, but if the Yankees played a little bit of defense, and now in total, Garrett Cole against the Dodgers in the World Series, 12 2/3, 1 earned run. it is still Garrett Cole. And then you have Max Fried is one of the best left-handed pitchers in Major League Baseball. Rodon is up and down, but when we're talking about the depth, Luis Heel doesn't have to come back so quickly. He can get
Yeah.
his legs up under him, right? He's recovering from a high grade right lat strain. Same injury as Frankie Montas. Give him a second to come back because you have Will Warren, because you have Marcus Stroman, because you have Clark Schmidt manning the 4, 5, and even 6 spot. When Luis Heel comes back, they can go 7 deep. And that's incredibly, incredibly exciting knowing how much top end talent there is.
I think Clark Schmidt's the guy that kind of becomes underrated here. Where when he was healthy, he was fantastic last year,
He
2.85
was.
ERA in what, like 85 innings. But if you go extrapolate over his last 30 starts, going back to 2023, I mean, this guy in 151 innings has pitched to a 3.70 ERA, a 3.82 FIP. He struck out 25% of batters. He's a very serviceable back end of the rotation starter that, as long as he's healthy, can give you a chance to win, every single time he's out there, which is all you really want out of your 4 or 5 starters. So I think Schmidt's huge here, and the development of him has been really important. And as long as he's available, I think the Yankees being willing to move Nestor Cortez was also predicated on the fact that they feel really good about what they've got from Schmidt, and hopefully Heel when he comes back as well. The rotation's definitely a strength.
Can you name 5 better rotations than what the Yankees have?
5 better. The Phillies,
Yep.
the Astros
You
are
think the Astros
close.
rotation is better?
Dodgers at Dodgers,
Dodgers. I would give the Mariners as well.
Mariners.
I think you could argue the Braves when Strider comes back, but that's when Strider comes
Yeah,
back.
that's win strategy. Opening day rotations. That might be it.
So I think
D-backs are close.
close. I would still take the Yankees.
Yeah, I mean it's top five. Yeah, it's a top five rotation.
All right, let's go over to the bullpen. And again, this bullpen reads Devin Williams as your closer, who they got in a trade with the Brewers in exchange for Nestor Cortez Jr. and Caleb Durbin. They also have Luke Weaver coming off just an awesome, awesome season. Ian Hamilton is back. They also traded for Fernando Cruz, heavy strikeout rate, big time splitter changeup. They brought back Tim Hill as the lefty, but they also signed Tyler Matzik, who was a part of the night shift with the Atlanta Braves, but he's a couple years removed from that. They signed him to a minor league deal, but they certainly needed a lefty, and a lot of people inside the Yankees are very excited about what he can bring this season. You still have Mark Leiter Jr., and then you have Yoendrys Gomez, who is one of the Yankees' better pitching prospects, slotting into more of a bullpen role. But on the injured list, guys who are expected to come back this season, including Jake Cousins, who flashed great stuff for the Yankees last season. Scott Efros, again, to start the year on the injured list. If we remember, he was in a trade for Hayden Wesneski. He had 5 years of control. I was unbelievably excited for it. And what has he done? Almost never pitched. But I'm
Yeah.
still excited what he does. And then, of course, they brought back Jonathan Loizaga. It is a stacked pen, but something that I've been noticing throughout this offseason as they continue to add, how many right-handed changeup slash splitters does one bullpen need? Right? You got Devin Williams in his changeup. You got Luke Weaver in his. You got Ian Hamilton in his Slombio or whatever that's called. Fernando Cruz, that's his main pitch. Mark Leiter Jr., that's his main pitch. I mean, how many bullpens have 5 righty dominant changeup splitter guys?
It's clearly something they like to identify and
Yeah.
utilize. It's interesting because you'd think they'd want to mix in some fastball slider types, but the Yankees have done a good job of putting together bullpens. I'm not going to doubt this one, and if they can get Efros back and Loizaga back at some point, you got to feel pretty good about what that bullpen looks like, and yeah, it's hard to argue against what they've been able to do from a developmental standpoint over the last couple years from that bullpen and spawning arms. Like it wouldn't surprise me if Mark Leiter got back to the best version of what we've seen from him. Like the Yankees have just had a knack for being able to do that. But moving Luke Weaver down to the eighth inning is pretty crazy, and that's a really nasty 1-2 punch with Williams and Weaver. And then I do think somebody else is going to kind of take a step forward and grab that seventh inning spot, whether it's Hamilton, Cruz, Leiter, Matzik, whoever it may be.
This is a really good team. Anything else to add before we move on to the Baltimore Orioles?
Really solid. I'm not fearing them but I think they're really solid. It's a well-rounded team for sure.
Yeah, I think the defense is still going to suffer a little bit. I think the offense is going to take a step back, but I think this rotation, right? We forget the rotation finished 11th in ERA last year. I think they're going to be well within the top 10. The bullpen finished 6th in ERA. I think they have a chance to outdo that. So this Yankees team is going to be better in run prevention, but they are going to lack in some areas when it comes to run scoring. All right, let's move over to the Baltimore Orioles, who finished second in the division last year, 91 and 71, and are definitely looking for some success this time around when it comes to the postseason because Orioles fans at this point expect this team in the hunt come October time. Let's talk about the offense because it is fucking loaded still. We make fun of the Orioles for their rotation. We make fun of Mike Elias for being too trepid in the market, but this offense is still awesome. Gunnar Henderson at the shortstop position, Adley Rutschman at the catcher position, Cedric Mullins, Tyler O'Neill, and Colton Cowser round out their outfield. In the infield, you got Jordan Westberg, you have Ryan Mountcastle at first base, Jackson Holliday is getting a full runway at second base, and of course, we already talked about Gunnar Henderson, and then you have Ryan O'Hearn at the DH spot with a bench littered with good players. I mean, Gary
Yep.
Sanchez is a great option as a backup catcher. Ramon Urias just continues to get reps on this team as a backup infielder. Heston Kjerstad, and then they brought in Ramon Laureano. Why did they do that? No idea, but
No
they did
idea.
do that.
Yeah.
So when we have our issues with the Orioles arm, it has nothing to do with this offense that finished fourth in OPS last season.
And the bench will only get better when, Jorge Mateo comes back and that's another guy that just is a great utility piece. And a contingency plan of Floriano is not playing great, but they paid him several $1 million. So I think he's gonna probably be on the roster for much of the year. This offense though is crazy. I expect Adley to bounce back offensively and be Adley. And you look at Westberg who missed some time, and you hope that O'Neill can be available because that obviously gives you a layer of athleticism and power that really makes this lineup dynamic. Cowser building on what was an amazing rookie season. This is a very, very, very fun offense. And then Samuel Basallo has a chance to get up there and potentially help at first base or filling in a catcher. And then the Gary Sanchez addition really was a sneaky one where that's a great bat off the bench or platoon guy or spot starter that can absolutely give you some offensive ability. If you are not getting a ton out of Mountcastle, or in days where you got a tough lefty on the mound and you want Mountcastle at first, you can put Gary in a DH for O'Hearn. There's a lot of ways where they can mix and match and put together a very platoon strong lineup also. So this is a deep, deep lineup. I think as deep as any in baseball when you consider the bench too. And I mean, 1 through 9, there's a lot of hitters that could do a lot of good things this year.
So I think it's easy to paint a picture, and it's probably the most likely scenario that this Orioles team remains in the top five. And here would be a recipe for that. Gunnar Henderson replicates what he did last year, remaining as one of the best shortstops in baseball. Adley Rutschman bounces back from his mediocre by his standards offensive output in 2024. Cedric Mullins, most of the same. Jordan Westberg repeats as an all-star level performer at the third base position. Colton Cowser replicates another 4-win season. Tyler O'Neill maybe doesn't need to hit 31 home runs, but if he hits 25 home runs with plenty of doubles, he will be a positive. Ryan O'Hearn and Ryan Mountcastle are both above average hitters, and Jackson Holliday doesn't even need to be great. He just needs to be solid for this
Mhm.
offense to be in the top five. Can you paint a picture of how it wouldn't be one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball?
I think it would be if Gunner misses more time than expected, which I don't think is going to happen. Cowser sophomore slump. Those things are all just kind of
Like
tinfoil
maybe it could
cap.
happen, but it's
The,
not like we're looking at something and be like, oh, Colton Cowser can't hit this pitch. This is why he's going to regress. It's just he could because it's a sophomore slump and it can happen to anybody.
those things are all feel like reaches to me. The most
Yeah.
realistic scenario is Adley doesn't bounce back as much as we think, and Tyler O'Neill is always hurt. But at that point, and Jackson Holliday struggles continue. That's kind of the worst case parlay there. And even then, you still have Gunner, Westberg, Cowser, O'Hearn, Mountcastle, Mullins. It's still going to be a good offense. Mayo can come up and help you. That's another bat that, yes, he was not good in his MLB debut. So many guys were not good in their MLB debut. Mayo has the ability to hit 30 plus homers as well. And that's a guy that's waiting in the wings. So even if certain players are struggling, they've got other guys that can potentially come up and make an impact between Basayo and Mayo. So it would take a very large series of unfortunate events for this offense to not be one of the better in Major League Baseball.
Agreed. Let's move on to the starting rotation because last season they finished fifth in ERA. They did finish 14th in WHIP, 18th in strikeout per nine, but that's when they had Corbin Burns, and now they lose him, and they kind of replaced him with guys like Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sagano. They still have, a guy like Trevor Rogers, but the rotation looks like this. Zach Eflin as probably the ace, but I think Orioles fans are hoping that Grayson Rodriguez takes that step to be the official ace of this team. Rounded out with Charlie Morton at 41 years old, Dean Kramer coming off, a mid fours kind of ERA type season. I mean, it might have been a little bit better than that.
It
I'll
was
give Dean
4-1. Don't
4-1-0.
slander my guy.
I'm not going to try and slander him too much, but and then Tomoyuki Sagano, who I still think I could get a head off in 10 plate appearances. Maybe not, but I still believe in myself. So I think what the Orioles are hoping for is that yes, they did lose Corbin Burns, but they only got 9 starts out of Zach Eflin. And now they hope Zach Eflin can give them 30 starts. So while they're losing 30 Corbin Burns starts, they're gaining 21 more Zach Eflin starts. Grayson Rodriguez also dealt with some injuries last season. He only made 20 starts. So, can we get 20 more starts from Eflin, 10 more starts from Grayson in order to replicate what we lost with Corbin Burns and then fill the holes up with Charlie Morton, Dean Kramer, and Tomoyuki Sagano? But just because that's what Mike Elias is thinking doesn't mean that it's that great of a plan, right?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the bullpen. I actually think that could ultimately be their saving grace and hedge the rotation concerns. The difference is, at least if your bullpen is your saving grace, you just need guys that can go out there and give you a decent start, not even a quality start. If Charlie Morton's going out there and giving you 5 innings, a 3-run ball every fifth day, with your offense and that bullpen, you got a chance to win, a lot of games. The frustrating part is I think they're filled with guys that you're kind of hoping are going to give you that 5, 6 innings, a 3-run ball, right? With Morton and Kramer and Chagano. So I could see the bullpen ultimately getting worked pretty hard because Grayson, you mentioned, you're just hoping he can stay healthy. And then Eflin, I think there were some concerns with his medicals at points during the trade process, but then he was good for the rest of the year, so that's fine. I like the Grayson Eflin 1-2 punch if there was a third punch there as well. That's the challenge. It just does feel like there's a big drop off from there. It does help that they have the bullpen. It is unfortunate if you have a Kyle Bradish who's not returning from Tommy John surgery. He's not going to make it back this year. I don't think it was end of June TJ, so probably
Yeah.
not back this year. That's unfortunate because Bradish, another guy that really does elevate this rotation, will be a great number 2, number 3 option wherever you want to slot G-Rod, depending on what kind of step he takes forward this year. But just with where they're at now, it's it's hard to talk yourself into this rotation being anything other than mediocre. And for it not to be mediocre, you would need Eflin to kind of match what he was doing with the Rays. I think most likely he's going to be that mid threes guy, which is really solid. If Grayson's a mid threes guy, really solid. Then Morton's in the fours, Kramer's in the fours, even low fours, Shigano's in the fours. This could still be a very good team with that recipe, but then you need the other things to go right as well. And I still don't even think that's like a median outcome. That's a pretty good outcome for the
Yeah.
rotation overall because that's assuming health as well. Of course, you can hope that Rogers comes back and they clearly feel like they can get something out of him. But he's also dealt with a lot of injury and he's hurt again. So it's a tough spot in general. I will say Cade Povich, I want to see him get more opportunity in general because when he's been on the mound, he's been pretty nasty. And I think Povich could end up becoming a unique X factor in this conversation as well because he has the strikeout ability and I think has a higher upside than some of the other names that we mentioned. And Povich, by the way, the other day, 3 innings, no runs, 6 Ks
Yeah.
against the Pirates. So Povich is a guy that I think could end up grabbing a spot and being an upgrade for him.
I agree. And Povich definitely does help, but one thing I still am worried about with this rotation, it's not even just the talent that's currently projected to be their top five, but it's also what happens if one of their top arms gets hurt. Because Grayson Rodriguez, we talk about Cade Povich looking awesome in his last spring training start. Grayson Rodriguez didn't. And it was almost scary because we saw him throw an 89-mile-an-hour fastball that was hit by, I think, Christian Vasquez and then exit the game. And I almost pressed the under button on BetMGM for the 88.5 wins as soon as I saw that. But then I saw after the game that Grayson Rodriguez was working on things that he didn't expect to be at the top of his velocity. That, even in that start, he was still 92 to 94. He was still feeling things out. So I'll give him a pass on that. But it did come up. If Grayson were to get hurt, even if Povich can step up and be a decent arm in this rotation, who else is filling in the gaps here? Because you say that Cade Povich has more upside than a lot of the other arms. The only other arm I can really think of is maybe a Chase McDermott who comes in. But while the Orioles have this amazing farm system, it's really centered on their bats. So their rotation, even right now, doesn't look that great. And if one of their arms goes down, the depth also looks really sour. Like when you compare them to the Yankees, they have the top end talent, but they also have two more guys that can come in and be legit arms. The Orioles don't have any of those, and they only have two legit arms in their entire rotation anyway.
Yeah, you're waiting for. I think Tyler Wells could be back at some point.
He's coming off the
Or-
UCL too. I don't even know if he's going
Yeah,
to be back all season long.
I think internal brace, so he should potentially be back mid-season. That's
Maybe.
still late in the game,
Yeah,
and then you're building him back up. I think a lot of this is going to be predicated on can they get Trevor Rogers right? And first step is just to get him on the mound, but can they get him right? Because that is a guy that has in the past looked like a middle rotation arm, but that feels like a long time ago. So that's the big wrinkle in this whole thing as well is of the names that we're just throwing out there, Rogers is the only one that's not 30 years old and has done it within the last it was done at the big league level, right? Frankly, over the course of almost a whole season. But again, that was a long time ago, and he's consistently banged up. Like Morton is not going to turn the clock back. That said, he could still give you 160 innings of a 4-2. That's great. But yeah, if someone goes down, all of a sudden you've got a rotation with one kind of number three guy in a good rotation, and then a bunch of fives. And that's a tough spot to be where you're going to have to really mash and then rely on the bullpen to be elite, which I do think it can be.
I agree. Let's move over to the bullpen because you got Felix Bautista back at the closer role, and he looked great in spring training. I was even talking about it on our TikTok live. I was like, I think the best part of spring training is when you see a guy like Sandy or Shane McClanahan dominate. It's those guys who are coming back from an injury, the stars of the game, who look exactly like they did before they got injured. That I think is when I get the biggest smile across my face when it comes to spring training, and Felix Bautista fits that mold. They bring in my guy, Andrew Kittredge, holds accumulator. He's not going to blow you away, but he's getting you through the seventh. He is. And then you got Keegan Aiken, who's a pretty solid lefty. You got Sir Anthony Dominguez, who they acquired from the Phillies last deadline. You still have Yenier Cano, who did take a step back after his incredible 2023 campaign, but is still a very solid reliever. And then you got Gregory Soto with some upside there. Sinel Perez, kind of the same type of arm. And then, of course, you have Albert Suarez, who did produce in the rotation last year, but I think there's a reason that he's taking more of a bullpen role this year because you look at some of the underlying metrics and it kind of looked like that foolish baseball meme, you know, the time to retire type of guy who's just accumulating innings and the underlying metrics look horrific. But in a bullpen role, I think he can at least be valuable back there. So this bullpen, it's going, the numbers I don't think are going to look quite as good as what the talent shows because I think they're going to be coming in a lot in the fifth inning. They're going to be throwing a lot of innings, but still, there's a ton of talent here that is going to make the starting rotation look a little bit better.
And I think they can shorten games pretty well here. Where Cano, if he's somewhere between his rookie season and what he was last year, he's a really solid high leverage arm. But even if he was what he was last year, it's a 3.15.
Still a good
It picked
reliever.
up 5 saves even too. He's a guy that's comfortable at leverage without a doubt. So Anthony Dominguez is a huge X factor in this bullpen because if he can look more like the high leverage arm he's been in the past, holy crap. Because
Yeah.
Aiken's good. Kittredge, as you mentioned, is just reliable and established. And then Bautista could be the best closer in baseball, or right there with the other two best closers in baseball. And it's right there with anybody. He's going to overwhelm you. So when you look at it from that lens, you could have a Sir Anthony Dominguez in the sixth, Yennier Cano in the seventh, Kittredge in the eighth, Bautista in the ninth, or Keegan Aiken in the seventh. However you want to mix and match it, that's a pretty reliable hand it off to the next guy type of situation there where they can shorten starts. And Albert Suarez being prepared to just be that eat it when it goes bad for some of these guys sometimes, being that guy for them too. I think McDermott, when healthy, could be very good in short spurts. And I've been asking for him to be in the bullpen for a while now too. That's a guy that could absolutely pitch at leverage if he gets comfortable there. This bullpen, I do think, could be one of the best in Major League Baseball if things go the way that they're hoping.
I think when overall I look at the Orioles, I see some downside, right? I could totally see a path to even 82 to 85 wins if this rotation ends up being what our expectations are for it, or potentially even worse, right? Because we talk about, can Cade Povich step up? Can Trevor Rogers fill in? But if neither of them can, and either an Eflin or a G Rod were to go down, or maybe not perform to the level that we like, this could be a really bad rotation and then eat into that bullpen, and they're sitting in the 82 to 85 win. Or if the rotation can just be fine enough, the bullpen and the offense are humming, this team has a pretty solid path to 90 wins. And I think as we continue through, let's talk about the Red Sox right now. There is a path that three teams in the American League East can win 90 games. I don't think that's impossible, right? I think it's happened before in the American League East a few years ago, where I'm pretty sure it was when the Orioles won 101 games, or that was one of the years where I don't really remember, but I know that the American League East can consistently put up three elite teams in this American League. Let's go over the Boston Red Sox, or do you have anything else on the Orioles before we move on?
Last thing I would just say on them is if their rotation is league average, they're going to make the playoffs. I think like that's all they really need. And I think that's how Michael Elias has looked at it. And if everything else is going well and the rotation's a little bit disappointing, maybe that'll facilitate a more aggressive move finally. But they don't need the rotation to be great. And that's the biggest part. So hopefully that will be enough for them to be able to get in there and again the offense is going to be really hard to ignore. But you look at kind of the Brewers model and what they've been able to do, you can maybe hope that they can duplicate that with even a little bit more offensive output and maybe a little bit less bullpen reliability, but still a really good one.
All right, let's talk about this Red Sox offense because it is loaded. In the outfield, you got Jaron Duran in left, one of the best left fielders in baseball. You got Willie Abreu, one of the best rookies in the American League last year. And in center field, you got Ceddanne Rafaela, who has shown a ton of raw talent. Can he finally put it together this season? And I say finally, he's still really young. That was the wrong word to use. But can he take a step up this season? Shortstop Trevor Story looks healthy, which is great news for this Red Sox defense. And hopefully he can hit a little bit. At first base, you got Tristan Casas. And then at second base, third base, we don't really know. But right now, we could say that Alex Bregman will be their second baseman and Rafael Devers will be their third baseman with Masataka Yoshida at DH. I have a feeling, Aram, that with Rafael Devers coming out and saying, I am playing third base, with Alex Bregman saying that he'll play anywhere, with all of these prospects knocking on the door, this might not look like the same offense by the deadline. But overall, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. I like this setup, to be honest. I think Bregman at second is fantastic. Of course, from a defensive perspective, you could move things around and make it a little bit better, but just given the chemistry side of things and Devers wanting to play third and whatever the deal is there, I do think just this offense is ridiculous. And I know people want to see Christian Campbell and maybe some of these other prospects, but this is your best foot forward out of the gate. I would love to see Roman Anthony potentially in the fold there, but you don't necessarily have to rush that if you like what you're seeing from Yoshida, who's healthy and apparently was a little bit banged up, playing through some stuff last year and has worked on some things through the offseason. That said, you have the perfect contingency plan that if Yoshida's continuing to struggle, Roman can be there ready to go. He's been great this spring, though. So that is another wrinkle where you got to find that spot. I would be pressing more to find a spot for Roman than Christian Campbell personally. But regardless, you look 1 through 9 here. Aside from Connor Wong and Ceddanne Rafaela offensively, you can feel pretty confident about all of these guys giving you above average offense, with some of them giving you well above that. Bregman, we've talked about being a monster in Fenway. Duran is, as you mentioned, one of the best corner outfitters in the game. I don't need to tell anybody about Rafael Devers. And if Casas is just healthy, we've seen what he can do offensively. This offense can be up there with any in Major League Baseball. And the Bregman addition, I think, just not only elevated the floor, but elevates the ceiling so much as well. I love what he brings to the team. And with the prospects knocking on the door, this is an offense that I do expect to be as good as just about any.
It's a dynamic offense. I mean, even last year, before adding Alex Bregman, they finished sixth in batting average, ninth in on base percentage, seventh in OPS. They were top 10 in both home runs and stolen bases, right? They're hitting for power and they're stealing bases. And when you can go Duran, Devers, Bregman, Casas to start, and then what if Trevor Story is a league average hitter? And what I mean by that is Trevor Story and Alex Bregman and Ceddanne Rafaela help this defense so much up the middle. We're going to talk about this rotation and how there's a lot of ground ball guys in it. And you Tanner Houck and Brian Bayo, all the ground balls that were scooting past this well below average Red Sox defense in the past. You get back Trevor Story, who was still two defensive runs saved, two outs above average in just a cup of coffee for the Red Sox last year because he was still dealing with injury. You have Alex Bregman, who won a Gold Glove at third, now moving over to second base. He can man that position with Rafaela going to get it in center field. I know they'll still be poor defensively on the corners because Devers is not a good defender over there at third, and Casas is not a good defender over there at first base. But this is one of the best defensive Red Sox teams they've ever put out. Not ever, but in the last like 5 or 10 years, while being one of the best offensive that they've had since 2021.
I think he'd be one of the best defensive outfields in baseball with
Yeah.
Duran in left and Willier in right with Rafaela in center. And then the contingency plan with if Rafaela is just chasing galore and it's not working offensively, you can then bring up Roman Anthony and
Yeah.
move Duran over to center where he graded out great. And that's still a phenomenal defensive outfield because Roman in a corner is great as well. It's a really advantageous spot. And you mentioned where they ranked offensively last year without Bregman. That was also without half of Casas because he only had 243 plate appearances and without 3/4 of Trevor Story. And I know Trevor Story may not light it up offensively, but go look at some of the players that they were plugging into the infield
Yeah.
last year, and we're weighing down potentially those offensive numbers. I don't think it's far fetched at all for Trevor Story to give you a 100 WRC plus. I think it can be better than that. If he gives you 100, it's gonna be better than what they were filling in at points last year. So I think they're in a really, really good spot offensively, and it's hard not to be very excited about this offense and just the balance of the team and the improved defense. The only concern I have, which is a marginal concern, is how left-handed heavy it can be maybe in certain matchups. But that's why you brought in Bregman. You can spread out the lefties enough and make this thing work. This is one of my favorite lineups on paper, I think, in baseball.
Do you prefer the Red Sox lineup to the Orioles lineup?
Hmm, that's a good question.
Because I think the Yankees are in third when it comes to the lineups
Yeah,
between these three teams. I personally would take the Red Sox lineup over the Orioles. I think the Orioles lineup is potentially a little bit deeper, like there's more above average bats. But outside of Gunnar, like if Gunnar and Rafael Devers are somewhat similar offensively, do the Orioles have as good of a hitter as Jaron Duran and Alex Bregman? I don't know. I think they have a lot of solid hitters. Like I think Jordan Westberg is very solid. I think Adley Rutschman is very solid. I think again Tyler O'Neill, Cedric Mullins, maybe Jackson Holiday, O'Hearn, Mountcastle. I think they're all solid. I think they're deeper. But in terms of upside, I'm
yeah.
taking the Red Sox offense.
Yeah, the upside is ridiculous. I think before the Bregman signing, I think you could make the Orioles
Yeah,
case, and it's probably neck and neck. the Bregman signing, I think, just puts him over the top for me because
Yeah.
it's the floor and the ceiling
Yeah.
that he brings to the table now too. Because you could argue, okay, well, at least I know what I'm getting with the Orioles for the most part. And yes, you have the volatility on the good side of what O'Neill could be. We saw that with the Red Sox last year. But with the volatility of the Red Sox, given the injuries of Story and Casas and Yoshida being inconsistent, and now you add Bregman to that to hedge that, I think this offense is just a force.
And now we move into the rotation. And again, it's maybe the best rotation in the division outside of the Yankees. The thing is why I say maybe is the Rays definitely have, a great rotation that we're going to talk about here. But Garrett Crochet at the top, I think he's going to win the Cy Young. I'm totally sold on him. His strikeout per nine in spring trading right now is like 19.2. I mean, he is
Yeah.
just striking out the world. It's dominant, dominant stuff. And then you have Tanner Houck, who was the Red Sox ace last year. Now he moves into more of the two spot. You bring in number zero, Walker Bueller, who looked awesome in his first spring training start. We're going to talk with him, in a few minutes here. You have Lucas Giolito coming back, and then Brian Bayo, and then Cutter Crawford. Like they also have Cutter Crawford, who was probably the third best pitcher on this team last year. He's now the sixth best. And just to show you how much improved this Red Sox rotation is, Brian Bayo was their opening day starter last year. Now he's the 4 or the 5 starter. Again, Walker Bueller is a huge X factor.
Oh yeah.
But hey, we over here believe in him.
Yeah.
So this is just such a good rotation.
I mean, adding Walker to this rotation is awesome because you have two guys coming back, and Walker, we just saw it on the big stage, and then Giolito is a guy that I do think with the Red Sox pitching infrastructure can kind of get back to closer to what he had been in the past. But how about the depth now too? All of a sudden, where it was so thin last year, you just mentioned Cutter Crawford being the sixth guy. And then you have Quinn Priester, who I think could be a solid innings eater in the back of the rotation. Richard Fitz has only been throwing in 2 inning spurts this spring, but that guy's been sitting 97
You talking Dick
in this
Fitz?
spring.
We're
And
talking Dick Fitz here. I like it.
we're talking Dick Fitz, dude. 97 in those two outings. So if that's a depth arm or swingman for you, that's great. They may get Patrick Sandoval back at the end of the year, but regardless, this is just so much more depth than they've had in the past. But then now you still have that upside where you have arguably you have the number one threat to Tarek Skubal for Cy Young. You have Walker Bueller, who we've seen him be one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball, and then we saw shades of that at the end of the year. And then you mentioned Houck and Giolito now mixing into that fold, and your opening day starter being your five now. It's things have to go right, but it's a lot. You don't have to squint very hard to see things going right, and they have way better contingency plans than they had last year.
And the bullpen could be where the team doesn't achieve, everything that we're putting on it. Because we love the lineup, we love the starting rotation. But you look at the bullpen and you say, who is going to step up here, right? Especially after losing Kenley Jansen, after losing Chris Martin. But they brought in Aroldis Chapman, who's likely going to be the closer with Liam Hendricks probably setting him up. One area that I think is a huge upgrade in this bullpen that has been an in-house guy is Garrett Whitlock. Now it's about staying healthy, but this guy has routinely put up an ERA below 3 as long as he's in the bullpen, right? He's tried spot starting, and this is the time where the Red Sox are pitching Cooper Criswell, and they need innings out of their starting rotation. So sometimes they go to Garrett Whitlock, and injuries have bit him in the ass. But now in a known bullpen role, they just got a really good reliever. Justin Slayton took a step up last season. Greg Weissert still has a wipeout slider. Brennan Bernardino is still a solid arm. We'll see what Josh Winkowski and Justin Wilson do, but this is likely a team that will be in the reliever hunt come deadline. And if they can add a big time guy in that role, sky's the limit for this team. But as of right now, the bullpen is definitely the weak spot.
I'm excited to see what Liam Hendricks can do, and obviously just an easy guy to root for. But if Hendricks is anything close to what he was before, that's a guy that's going to give you that veteran know-how and replace what you had from Kenley with maybe not as much of the roller coaster. Chapman, we talk about it. He's going to go out there and do it, and he just continues to do it. There's volatility there, but when he's not getting the ninth as much, he's getting the eighth. That may be a little bit better. I love Slayton. I think he was banged up at points. Otherwise, it would have been just a full-fledged, I think, breakout as a Rule 5 pick. He was my favorite guy out of that Rule 5. But this is still a bullpen where you could talk yourself into it. But if they have to make a move, they can go make it. It's so much easier to address the bullpen. At least they have a handful of guys that you can look at and say, okay, I can see him contributing instead of, oh gosh, who's this? Who's it going to be here? And if it doesn't happen, they'll go make the move. So I think it's clear that the bullpen is the biggest weakness, but they do have decent irons in the fire. And if they have to go make another move, they will. They've got a great farm system. It won't be too hard to add relievers.
For all the people looking for MLB futures, I did bet over 86 and a half wins for the Boston Red Sox, and I bet them plus 440 to win the division. So we'll talk about our predicted order of finish when we're done with the Rays and the Blue Jays. But for anybody who's interested again in using code JustBaseball for that first bet offer up to $1,500, potentially if it's your first bet on BetMGM, consider the Boston Red Sox. Tampa Bay Rays coming off an 80 and 82 win season. Got a new park, Steinbrenner Field. No more of the Trop for this season. We'll see about the seasons, in 2026, 2027, how they're able to rebuild the Trop, after the horrible hurricanes hit Florida. But for now, they'll be playing their games at Steinbrenner Field again in Florida. First baseman, Yanni Diaz. Second baseman, Brandon Lau. Third baseman, Junior Caminero. And shortstop, Taylor Walls until Ha-Seong Kim comes back. In right field, you got Josh Lowe. Left field, Christopher Morel. Center field, Johnny DeLuca with Jonathan Aranda at DH. And the new catcher, they finally spent some money on a catcher, Aram, bringing in Danny Jansen, and the bench is just filled with all of their young guys, whether that be Curtis Mead. They also have Jose Caballero, Richie Palacios, and Ben Rortfit as the backup catcher. Got a lot of upside, I will say, in this lineup, but I could definitely see the downside being a more likely scenario here. But there's still some exciting names splintered throughout, most notably Junior Caminero. But unfortunately, Junior just went down with back tightness in a spring training game today. Hopefully, he's okay. But I think Josh Lowe is an enormous X factor for this team.
Oh yeah, player I've long liked too, but just a swing and miss has hurt him at times, and then also just injuries here and there has been something that's held him back. What are you going to get from Christopher Morel, who was -1 F4 guy last year? You don't know where to put him defensively, and he's so volatile offensively. Yandy needs to bounce back, and I think he will. The quality of contact was not that far diminished, and he's still 33. He's not 36. So I think that's a huge part of this thing as well. But I agree, Josh Lowe's a huge, huge X factor here. That do they bring up some guys from the farm system at some point this year to give them a spark? Chandler Simpson, we see is potentially just making his case to be an early call up or potentially break in on the opening day roster. I think DeLuca's gonna get every opportunity to play center field because of how good he is defensively. But Simpson could be a guy that just makes this lineup so much more dynamic and kind of create his own runs too. They have other options. I think Aranda is going to be awesome this year, especially with the short porch and right. I'm excited to see what he can do there at Steinbrenner Field. But yeah, there's a world where this offense could be frustrating. I think the Kim signing was huge as well because shortstop like Taylor Wallace is definitely not the guy that you want to have if you're trying to win the division. I think you like him better as a bench piece. But when Kim's healthy, you could talk yourself into this lineup if a couple guys bounce back and the other guys are doing what they've been normally doing. But a lot of them were banged up, and injuries have kind of been a theme with this ball club, unfortunately.
And speaking to that, I know Rays fans want a better year from Yandy Diaz. I mean, this guy put up a 163 WRC plus in 2023, was a 5-win player, and that's coming off a 2022 campaign, 145 WRC plus, 3.9 F-WAR. Last year, only 14 home runs. He didn't hit his normal 300, only hitting 281 with a 120 WRC plus. The Rays need him to get back to being one of the better offensive pieces at the first base position. And I want to say they need a big year out of Brandon Lau, but if they get a big first half out of Brandon Lau, he's probably getting traded, right?
Maybe he said he wanted to retire there, but that doesn't mean anything,
Yeah.
obviously. I don't know. Like, I don't know. If he's playing well, it'd be hard to justify that because he's probably one of their only consistently proven bats. I do think Danny Jansen, I was talking about this with Clay Snowden. He's wrote a piece on this on justbaseball.com about how Danny Jansen's kind of the perfect fit for what the Rays want to do, whether they're playing at the Trop or they're playing at Steinbrenner, where he pulls the ball in the air consistently and in the right environment. Could tap into a little bit more power, like Isak Peretti style. Obviously, not to that degree, but as your catcher, if he's doing even half of that, I think you'd be really happy with the other things that he brings to the table. So, them investing in catcher is huge. But the thing with the Rays is, if some guys aren't performing, like we said, that they've got other guys that they can bring up and plug in immediately. And I think DeLuca sticking in center and potentially having a Chandler Simpson in left if Morel's not performing could be a way where they start to just lean into the speed and defense and become a really fun, dynamic team that can create a lot of runs and be pitching centric. So I think you could look at this current starting nine and say, "Ooh, it could get ugly quick." But there's a lot of options that they could plug in pretty quickly as well that could help them. And I think Simpson, I don't want to put too much onto one player, but he can really add another wrinkle to this ball club.
Absolutely. And there is a path to the playoffs for the Rays in 2025. I know they only won 80 games last year, but this team is going to pitch. 10th in ERA from the starting staff last year, 10th in ERA from the relieving staff, but they finished 29th in OPS as an offense. So the path to the playoffs, the recipe for success for this Rays offense is if Jonathan Aranda, Christopher Morel, Josh Lowe, take a big step forward, and Junior Caminero is the guy we all envisioned as one of the top prospects in baseball, and Yandy Diaz and Brandon Lau are both what we know them to be. Brandon Lau with the big time power, Yandy Diaz operating in the 140 to 160 WRC plus. If all of those things happen, this team could leapfrog a Baltimore, a New York, a Boston, whichever team maybe falls flat of our expectations for them. I would not be surprised to see the Rays in the playoff hunt.
No,
But
you should never be surprised to see the Rays in the playoff hunt.
exactly, I would never be surprised, but that is asking a lot from a lot of different hitters, but they do have it in them. So it's just kind of a lot of up in the air analysis for the Tampa Bay Rays going into the season.
Yeah, and Mead, I think being able to handle the short side of the platoon finally. What do you get from some of these bench guys? Will be interesting. Does Carson Williams get up and contribute? But I think Kim ultimately will help them a lot, even if he's a 105 WRC plus. The defense, again, being speed and defense could be all they need offensively, with Caminero being the bopper and Lau as well, with Yandy doing what he does, and then just really leaning into what this pitching staff can do, which I mean, this might be with what they're going to do bullpen wise, with what they have now on the rotation side. This could be as disgusting of a Rays pitching staff as we've seen from top to bottom in a while.
And to just further that point, this Rays pitching staff is led by Shane McClanahan, Taj Bradley, Ryan Pepiot, Zach Littell, Shane Boz, Drew Rasmussen. These six names have the ability to be the best rotation in the division. Even better than the Yankees, even better than the Red Sox. But similarly to the Twins offense that we were just talking about, please, for the love of God, stay healthy. Right? Shane McClanahan is returning from Tommy John surgery. Taj Bradley has been relatively healthy, but not the healthiest. Ryan Pepiot has dealt with injuries in the past. Zach Littell has probably been the healthiest out of all of them, and Shane Boz returns from injury. Drew Rasmussen returns from injury. And this is sometimes what has bit the Rays, right? Even injuries, they can still be a top 10 staff, but if they stay healthy, they can be a top 5 staff. But this year, they are set up well for success, and it does seem like everyone's healthy to start the year, and that's all we can look at right now.
Yeah, and trying to project injury is always going to be impossible. But
Yeah.
Rasmussen looking like Rasmussen again. I know they were being careful in the eye, being able to the idea of having him as a starter this year. They wanted to ease him in as a reliever and then start a little bit in shorter spurts, and he was great. I think being able to be available to start this coming season, we've seen Rasmussen be fantastic. Shane Baz getting further away from TJ, we know what he's capable of, and then Pepiot was awesome last year, and I think he's only going to get better. The big X factor obviously is Shane McClanahan, and are you getting anything close to what he was before the second TJ? But I assume he will be close to that. This is high octane stuff of a rotation, but also just a solid top to bottom. If you have a six-man rotation like this, it helps preserve these guys, but each of these guys could be dominant every fifth day. So I think this is as scary as it comes. And if you're going to have a handful of risky kind of injury history type of guys, might as well have a six-man rotation to be able to plug and play. They also have several guys in AAA that I really like. Ian Seymour was phenomenal last year as a starter, and was added to the 40 man. Could be a guy that could very easily plug in and be a quality starter. They've got Joe Boyle throwing strikes, so we'll see what he can do. Yanni Alcantara could be a guy that they end up plugging into the bullpen or spot starting. So they've got other guys waiting in the wings to be able to plug and play if they need to.
Sneaky good team. And then we go into the bullpen. Again, it's led by Pete Fairbanks, but Edwin Uceta took a huge step forward last year. 1.51 ERA in 41 innings while striking out 12.31 batters per 9 innings. Garrett Cleavinger is still a solid reliever. Manuel Rodriguez, again, pitched to a 2.15 ERA in 37 innings. Mason Montgomery, young lefty, 1.86 ERA, but it was only in about 10 innings. And then they added Alex Faedo from the Detroit Tigers and Mike Vassell, another arm that they got from the Phillies, I think, last year. Again, it's a lot of guys who you may not know their name, and there may be guys who end up being one of the best relievers on the Rays that aren't even slotted in their front seven to start the year. So it's, again, Rays just figure out ways to form a bullpen. Again, they were a top 10 bullpen last year.
I mean, Montgomery throwing fuel in shorter spurts now is crazy. I think he's going to be dominant from the left side. And Uceta was as dominant as anybody in Major League Baseball. He's being regarded now, I think, is an elite reliever. So you don't even have to know the names. You don't even have to look at the roster resource. You
Yeah.
can just assume that the Rays are going to have a great bullpen. I know that's lazy, but you don't even have to make it be lazy because I can go through each of these guys and tell you why they're nasty and why they're unique. And then I can go to AAA and tell you why those guys could be nasty and unique. Seymour, I just mentioned who I like as a starter. You put him in shorter spurts, could be very nasty as well. I think Correa is going to get up there and just invisible his fastball to success once they're ready to do that. And then again, Joe Boyle, they're trying to stretch him out again and see if he could be a starter. But if you put that guy in short spurts, holy crap, this stuff is crazy. So this bullpen is going to be elite. I don't think I need to sell, or either of us have to sell anybody on that.
I think when I just look at the Rays, it's can some of the pieces on offense have either bounce back years or take the next step? Because when I look at the rotation, I see a ton of talent, but I also see some injury concerns. But I know that they have guys coming up the pipeline that can fill those innings. I know that the bullpen, no matter who the name is, they're going to figure out a way to be a top half bullpen at the very worst, most likely a top 10 unit. So, what will make the Rays this season? Can their offense show up? And if it doesn't, again, they're likely due for a similar season to last year. But if it does, they'll be in the playoff hunt. Last, but not really least, because I do think that the Blue Jays have gotten better this offseason. They, were in the running for, all of the big name guys on the free agency side, but they ended up just going with, Anthony Santander and trading for Andres Jimenez. But the offense, it still looks pretty good. Bo Bichette at shortstop, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at first base, second base, Andres Jimenez, and then third base, probably going to be manned by Ernie Clement. Maybe they'll make a change there, or they'll just rock with Ernie. In the outfield, it looks like it's going to be Joey Loporfito in center field, George Springer in right, and Anthony Santander in left. And at the DH spot, I don't know why Roster Resource has Dalton Varsho in there. You'd assume Dalton Varsho would be the center fielder because he's one of the
Yeah,
best defensive outfielders in Major League Baseball, and then at catcher Alejandro Kirk.
yeah, I think it's maybe the shoulder issue, but he'll be
Maybe.
playing the outfield. Springer, I'm
Yeah.
sure, will be filling that DH spot pretty consistently. And then
Yeah.
Wagner, I'm sure, will be mixing in and playing different positions around the infield. There's depth there all of a sudden, right? Where David Schneider, I still think is going to be a good bounce back candidate, and you put in positions for success. Like that's a guy that you're specifically deploying into favorable matchups, but he's a guy that can absolutely run into baseballs. The lineup is solid. If I think the big X factor beyond what you're getting from some of the young guys, so that you want some clarity from a Joey Loperfido is and David Schneider, Will Wagner, see what they do. But I think the big thing too is just what you get obviously from Bo Bichette. And are you going to get anything from George Springer? I know he's been fine in stretches, or is this really the final step of the downturn? Right, he was serviceable last year, the 1.2 FWAR, but this is George Springer. They're paying him a lot of money. He's 35. Seems like he's slowing down, but if he can have this revitalized season to a degree, I mean, that would help them so much because you look at the 2024 numbers, George Springer, 95 WRC plus, Dalton Varsho, 99, but he's an elite defender. Alejandro Kirk, 94. Yes, he's giving you some defense, but Andres Jimenez, 83, but he's giving you some defense. Ernie Clement, 94, but he's giving you some defense. I get it. I get they're defensive oriented, but your only two hitters that are feared and masters can't just be Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Anthony Santander. And I know a lot of that goes on to the back of Bo Bichette as well, who's on a contract year and needs to do it. And I think Bichette's probably the biggest X factor, but then Jimenez needs to be better and needs to justify the acquisition. And then one of the young guys needs to step up.
I am excited about Anthony Santander because while this team does have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you wouldn't think they'd be in the need for power, but they only finished 26 out of 30 teams last year in home runs. You bring over Anthony Santander's 44. Now, does he replicate 44 again? It's anybody's guess, but I think it's pretty fair to project him at least with more than 30 and more likely being in the 35 to 40 range as long as he stays healthy. So that definitely adds some protection for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But I think a lot of the Blue Jays season is going to be decided on Bo Bichette. Because if Bo Bichette goes back to being one of the better offensive shortstops in Major League Baseball, it puts not as much pressure on Dalton Varsho to step up offensively, for Alejandro Kirk to step up offensively, Andres Jimenez, George Springer. These guys just have to be average because if you have three guys who are that elite, this offense can be very solid. But will Bo Bichette get back to it? I'm confident that he can return at least somewhat close, but last year was tough for us Bo Bichette believers. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, he can't be one of the worst shortstops in baseball.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not gonna work. But if he's Bo Bichette, yeah, that top three there is a force. But even then, it's hard to talk myself into this offense because who's who's the cleanup hitter? Who's the fourth best bat in this
Will
lineup?
Wagner is going to rake.
You didn't even mention him in the starting nine.
Still gonna rake because I wanted my own section for him. For we're gonna spend the next 50 to 55 minutes just on Wagner.
Like that's the thing. Like who is the guy that steps up to outside of that trio? And we're already being ambitious for the
Yeah, on
third
Bo
fiddle
Bichette.
there of the trio with Bo
Yeah,
Bichette because he had a 598 OPS last year. Like this team, man, it's better. But you said last but not least, last but least. It's last but least. It's better, but it's last but least.
that's fair. Let's talk about something that I do like. I think this rotation is pretty solid. I think it has a pretty high floor, right? When you have Gosman and you have Barrios and you have Bassett. And I think as long as Scherzer is healthy, now that's asking a lot, right? He is 40 years old and he's going to turn 41 sometime during the season. So to ask him to stay healthy to be the Max Scherzer of old is asking for too much. But can we get 140 innings at a 3.8? I think it's very possible. And with Bowden Francis as well looking really, really good down the
Yeah.
stretch for the Blue Jays, like there's some stuff to dream on. And of course, they still have Yaro Rodriguez, and maybe Alek Manoah can be anything for the team this year.
Yeah.
Not a super sexy rotation, but I think it has a relatively high floor.
I was gonna say I don't see a way where this rotation sucks.
No.
So that I think is gonna be very solid. Gosman, I still believe. I do think he was throwing through something last year. He wasn't feeling great out of the gate. If Gosman can recapture some of the 2022, 23 Gosman, then you feel really good. But Barrios is one of the best innings eaters in Major League Baseball. Bassett might be right there too. So you just have two guys that are going to be walking quality starts or at least close to it and giving you a shot and eating those innings. And Yariel as your alternate as well in a swingman is solid. I do like the rotation. I think that's their clear cut strength. And pitching wise in general, they're pretty solid. That this bullpen we were clowning last year is, I think, a lot better this year as well. And you don't need the Orioles situation as much, where it's like, okay, yeah, I could see the eighth and ninth inning, but who's picking up the sixth, seventh? I think a lot of times they're only going to need the seventh, eighth, ninth for the most part, and they can run guys out there more consistently. Their top guys utilize them a little bit more because you're going to get a lot of six inning starts from Barrios and Bassett. Even if they're giving up three, four runs, they're going to turn over six, sometimes seven innings. So I feel pretty good about that. And I should mention Gausman's one of the best innings eaters as well. He threw 181 last year in what was not his best year. So I feel good about what the rotation can do to give them a shot, but that's where it ties back to the offense and like, come on, can they get a little bit more there? But at the same time, with how good the defense is for them, I think that's something that the starting pitching staff can lean into and just roll ground balls and eat innings. And they may be one of the better innings eating rotations if Scherzer's healthy that you got out there. And then when Manoah returns, it just only helps that.
But they're going to need to eat innings because Blue Jays fans remember this very well. Whenever they would turn it over to the bullpen, it was absolute chaos, and not the chaos that the Tigers were building. It was the complete opposite type of chaos. This bullpen finished 29th in ERA, and in about every stat that anybody would care about, they were in the bottom 10. It was not a good unit. So what did they do? They went out and signed Jeff Hoffman. Now, they did lose Jordan Romano, but if we're just looking at last year,
Yeah.
Jordan Romano did not help this team at all. His ERA was in the sixes. But you've talked about it before, with the arbitration stuff. They could
They
have
should
just
have
given
just tendered him a contract and
tendered him a
traded him if they
contract
didn't want
at
him.
6 million or trade him, and he ends up signing with the Phillies for 8. Whatever, right? That is definitely could be something that is on Ross Atkins' mantle, is another not so good thing that he did, but doesn't necessarily affect the team this year because Jeff Hoffman is a better
Mhm.
pitcher than Jordan Romano is. Chad Green is still a solid reliever. Bringing Yimi Garcia back is big. Swanson, we'll see, has proven to be a good reliever in the past, but not so much lately. Nick Sandlin, it's kind of the same story there. Also, shout out Nick Sandlin, friend of the Just Baseball show. You got Brendan Little, who's, the walks and the strikeouts aren't necessarily there. We'll see what he looks like. And then you got Tommy Nance and then Yaro Rodriguez rounding it out. So Jeff Hoffman, I really like. Chad Green, I kind of like. Yimi Garcia, I do like. The rest, we'll see. But it looks
It's
better than last year. But
it's
it wasn't hard to
better.
look better than last year.
Yeah, it's not hard to be better than it was last year, but it is better. I will say on the rotation side, another just reliable, I think, higher floor prospect arm that they acquired from the Astros, Jake Bloss, another guy that I do think can plug and play and be solid for them. But yeah, a lot is going to be relied on with Jeff Hoffman, but they didn't have anybody remotely as reliable as Jeff Hoffman last year. So that alone really does elevate this pen. I think Chad Green absolutely now is kind of sliding and just being that seventh, eighth inning guy for you is great. I ultimately think they're going to be better bullpen wise, but you are very much counting on a bounce back from a Sandlin or a Swanson. But at least they've got a couple guys that you've seen it in the past, and you hope that they can bounce back. I also think if Yariel's in short spurts, maybe he ends up becoming a really solid seventh inning guy that can go multiple innings when you need. So the swingman Yariel could end up elevating this bullpen a lot too.
Overall, they won 74 games last year. I think this team is going to be in the high 70s, maybe even the low 80s.
They'll
I
be
think they're going to
better.
be they're going to be a solid team. I think they're going to be one of those teams that when they roll into, if you're a fan of a different team, they can beat you on any given day.
Oh yeah.
But again, there are going to be struggles there, and I'm looking at you, Bo Bichette. Can George Springer have anything left in that bat? Can young guys like Will Wagner step up? Can Alejandro Kirk be better? Andres Jimenez, there's a lot of questions there. Don't have as many with the rotation at all. It's kind of exactly how they draw it up. And then the bullpen. Can it be good enough to close out games for the Blue Jays when they do have a lead? Let's get to our predicted order of finish. I could go first. I'll run through mine. My predicted order of finish for the American League East can be the Boston Red Sox winning the division. I think they've done enough this offseason. I think they vault up the division and end up winning it. I have the Yankees finishing in second, not far behind, probably in the 89 to 91 win area. I think the Red Sox are going to be in the 93 to 95 win area. Then I have the Orioles coming in third, but still making the playoffs, right? I have them 88 to 90 games. Again, all three really competitive. I have the Rays finishing around 500 in the fourth spot, and then I have the Blue Jays finishing around 500 in the fifth spot. This is a very good division. And again, I have the Blue Jays finishing last, but I think the Blue Jays in other divisions, would be better.
Yeah, it's hard for me to have a much different outcome there. The one that I am juggling with, because I do have the Red Sox winning the division too. I just, with the farm system that they also have, whether that be supplementing them at the big league level or making another trade, I just think they're going to be in a position to do some impressive things. They could easily go make a trade for Sandy as well and just make that a silly rotation out there. So I think the Red Sox could take it. I have them finishing first. I think it's gonna be really close between the Orioles and the Yankees, and obviously there's some interesting variables there. But I'm gonna side with the Orioles at number two. Then I'm gonna go Yankees at number three, Rays at four, and the Blue Jays at five. But I don't feel great about it. I think there's so much variance with the Orioles and Yankees. I could see it going either way, and I think both teams are going to be solid.
Sorry, everyone. I know we just teased a Walker Bueller interview, but unfortunately, scheduling conflicts got caught up, but he rescheduled for next week. So again, Walker Bueller will be on the Just Baseball show next week. We're going to continue to talk about the Red Sox. He'll get another start under his belt. You're hearing this on Friday, so make sure to tune into that start as well. Arm, you
It'll
got
be with
anything
Jack on the
else?
call, right? It'll
Yeah, he
be
should
so
be.
that'll be cool. So yeah, tune into it. You can listen, and then we'll talk to him about that. So yeah, another start for Walker to build off of. We get to talk about it, and we can get Jack's thoughts too as he gets to call it. That's a pretty cool wrinkle in this whole thing too.
Absolutely. And I'm excited for Jack to experience the other downsides of Florida. I do like the weather overall, but there have been some times where I visited you where it's like, oh, we're going to a game today. It's 70 and sunny, but then you check the weather app. But yeah, in 3 hours, there's a rainstorm coming, and then it'll be free 2 hours after that. So the constant weather changes. I'm excited for Jack to talk about that. But hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. Well, of course, we don't have the Walker Bueller episode on this one. Still an hour 40, tons of stuff that we talked about AL East preview. And if you enjoyed, the best way to support on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, rate reviewing 5 stars and even leaving a written review if you would be so kind. On YouTube, subscribing, hitting the like button, commenting anything down below. Have a great weekend. Go get your Just Baseball merch. And on Monday, be on the lookout for our Discord. Again, we're trying to build the best baseball group chat in the world. Only $10 a month to enter, $5 for your first month. For Arm Layton, I'm Peter Apple. With that, thank you, everybody.